Hey, everybody. This episode of Our Kids Play Hockey is brought to you by our title sponsor, NHL Sense Arena. Look, we all want our kids to succeed in hockey, but let's face it, finding training that's both effective and enjoyable can be a real challenge, and not to mention expensive and a total drain on time, especially if you have to drive to the rink, pay a private instructor. There's so many reasons that money gets spent on this game. But that's where NHL Sense Arena steps in. It's a virtual reality training game that brings the rink into your home that takes off-ice training to a new reality. It's designed to improve hockey sense and IQ, something that's lacking majorly in the game today for both players and goalies. And you get unlimited access to over 100 drills and training plans from top coaches and players that can be played anytime, anywhere, with drills approved by USA Hockey player and goalie development directors. Look, improving mental hockey skills at home has really never been more fun, and any hockey player that uses this is going to have a blast. All right. I've used this before on my own, and it feels like you're so immersed in an arena, you sometimes forget you have a headset on. And again, it's not being on the ice, but it allows you to work on some of these skill sets like scanning, as I said before, hockey IQ, looking around the rink, making the right plays, that getting those repetitions in now as a hockey player are super important for your development. So NHL Sense Arena is giving all the listeners an exclusive offer for $50 off an annual plan when you use our code Hockey Never Stops at checkout. Again, that's Hockey Never Stops. All you got to do is go to hockey.sensearena.com. Again, that's hockey.sensearena.com. Use the code Hockey Never Stops, and you'll save $50 on your annual plan of NHL Sense Arena. Make sure to check that out and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Hey, everybody, it's another episode of Our Kids Play Goalie today. Again, if you're a skater or a coach that doesn't have a goaltender in your family, stay tuned. This is great information for all of us, as the purpose of these episodes is to expand that position to benefit the entire team. And our guest today is a former professional goalie. Laura Brennan joins us. She is a fantastic guest. We dive into everything today, from perspective, from the might level, up of things you can do as a goalie, as how we're all goaltending coaches if we're on the ice, all the way to the mental side of goaltending. Just a lot of golden nuggets in this episode, no matter what position you play. So enjoy it. Also, still the holiday season here. So if you're looking for a great gift idea, what we did was aggregate them all together so I don't have to do some annoying read before the show about why this company is right for you. So just head over to ourkidsplayhockey.com and check out our holiday deals. We put them all on one page. So it's great if you're looking for individual deals or team deals. We just kind of found the best ones we could for you and put them there. So with that said, enjoy this edition of Our Kids Play Goalie with Laura Brennan. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to Our Kids Play Goalie, our monthly movement into the goal crease so we can all learn and discuss the position of goaltending as a community. This is not limited to just goaltending parents and goaltending coaches. It's for all of you. Our last goaltending episode did fantastic, so we want to thank you for diving back in with us today. Lee Elias here with Mike Benelli and Christy Casciano Burns, and we are joined by a former professional and NCAA Division I netminder. In addition to her time in the crease, she also served as a goaltending coach, assistant coach, interim GM, and assistant GM in the NWHL, which is known today as the Premier Hockey Federation. And she continues to serve today as a USA Hockey goaltending development coordinator for Connecticut and as a coach for youth athletes. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Laura Brennan to the show today. Laura, welcome to Our Kids Play Goalie.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for being here. As we said, this is a Mike Benelli suggested guest. We do not say no to Mike when he says you got to get this person on. I can't do it. Mike, I can't do a great impression of you. Yeah,
they're slam dunks when they get
slam dunks.
My guests come on.
That's, I mean, it's a hockey show, Mike. That's the best pun. You couldn't do slap shot, or that was the best you got?
No. I'm good. Let's go. Come on. Let's get going with her.
All right, Laura, listen, I'm going to kind of start these episodes the same way. Every goaltender has a story about how they were placed between the pipes. Were you voluntold to play? Were you a younger sister? Did you naturally flock to that position? How did you become a goaltender?
I was voluntold. I grew up in Minnesota, and everyone grows up learning how to skate, so I don't remember that part. When I was growing up, girls hockey didn't exist yet. So I saw the movie Mighty Ducks and said, hey, I want to play hockey. But then, my parents are like, hey, girls don't really play hockey. So in third grade, someone in my class brought a rubber ring to show and tell. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with ringette. I know a lot of, youth hockey, they use the ringette ring, turn your sticks over. So I started in ringette, tried goalie in that, and had a misfortune of getting the ring stuck on my finger and throwing the ring in the back of my net. So that made me kind of shy away from the position for a little bit. And then, once I moved into hockey in 5th grade, girls hockey started, and I transitioned to hockey, played a little bit, and it turns out that I was one of the best kids in the net, but I still love scoring goals. And even to this day, I still love scoring goals. You can see that when I'm coaching the little kids. But by the time I was in 8th grade, playing fall hockey, one of my friend's dad said, "Hey, if you want to be on our team, you have to be goalie full time. Like, we need you to play goalie full time." So I made that transition, thought the pads were cool, so it wasn't too hard of a sell. And then that year I made varsity as an 8th grader. So
Wow.
I think it was a pretty good suggestion for me to play goalie and stick with it. So that's kind of how I got thrown into the net there.
So let me ask this. You mentioned before about there was no girls hockey. So you're in a trailblazer pathway here, in my opinion. All right. And I always like to bring this up because I know we have fathers and mothers who listen to this show who have daughters playing. I'm one of them. Right. And you have led the way for this to be normal for my daughter. Right. In a lot of different ways. My daughter looks at you and says, "Oh, women have been playing hockey my whole life." And it's true. So from a mental fitness, mental health standpoint, can you dive into maybe some of the challenges you faced with girls don't play hockey, how you overcame that? And then obviously, as a goaltender all the way up through to the NWHL at the time you were there, I'm sure you faced a lot of gates, if you will, of people saying, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" How do you overcome that? And how should we as a hockey community be supporting you and other girls?
Right. So I think, we've done a really good job, as a society to normalize girls playing hockey. When I look back growing up in Minnesota, it's like everybody was skating on the ponds, everyone was playing together. And I think it was more of parents were concerned about the safety aspect of it, just because, it wasn't a normal thing. But once my parents specifically saw all the gear, they saw that, I wasn't going out there getting injured, and I was having fun. I had a background in dance and gymnastics, and that was very high intensity, a lot of stress for me. But once I got onto the ice, just skating around, it was, way more fun, less pressure for me, and I could enjoy the time being with my teammates. And, I was fortunate to be able to play with girls throughout my entire hockey career, where, a lot of kids don't have that experience. And I think it's great to start out co-ed, but as you get older, there's something different about being with, a group of girls in the locker room, as opposed to being kind of like the outsider as, maybe 1 or 2 girls on the team playing on a boys team.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I just had that conversation with a dad who was wrestling with whether or not to keep his daughter on an all boys team. His argument was, well, if she stays with the boys, they're so much faster and more aggressive. And so then when she eventually, his goal was for her to play college hockey, she's going to be the toughest one on the team. And I said, time out. Women's hockey has evolved. It's not a bunch of foo-foo girls out there delicately hitting a puck. I said, it's fierce hockey. It's competitive. And I said, and your daughter is missing out on the camaraderie, which I have found when Sophia made the switch. She was on an all-boys team, hopped over to all-girls team. The camaraderie was amazing in the locker room, sharing stories, incredible bonding, where I felt she was a little bit on the outside. Not that the boys didn't accept her as, a sister, which was great. And they were very protective of her on the ice, which sometimes interfered with some of the play as well, because Sophia was the target. She had the ponytail. When boys saw the ponytail, they hit the ponytail girl, and they thought that was cool. and then our boys would go out and protect her. So when she transitioned over to the girls team, it was an amazing for her on a lot of levels, competitively, the camaraderie, and just kind of a different style of play. Very, very, a lot of finesse. Yeah. I don't know if you found that too.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the differences in the style of play, but you know, now the girls' game is getting faster. It's getting physical. You watch one of these pro games, there's tons of hitting in them, even though, you know, body checking isn't legal. You still get a lot of body contact. So that's one of like the stigmas against the girls' game is like, oh, you know, it's soft. There's no hitting, but it's definitely changing, and especially at the youth level, you know, girls take that growth spurt a lot faster than the boys do. So sometimes you'll see like a giant girl on a team, and it's surprising, but you know, it's cool to have them, you know, integrated, but it's also cool to, you know, see them on girls specific teams as well.
Yeah, I know we're in like the goalie centric piece here, and I probably want to stick on the goaltending side, but just from a beginner hockey, you know, youth hockey level with the girls, what I found is the quicker we separate the girls into their own groups and into their own communities, I just found they're more comfortable, like they're more open to learning, they're more open to having fun, like, and whether it's right or wrong, and maybe I'm wrong, but I just teach differently. Like I have so much more fun when I see the little girls skating around and they're hitting each other and knocking each other down, and you know, and you know, because like the kids I work with, like 7, 8, 9-year-old boys, can almost be too aggressive and can be in a point where now, you know, if we want the longevity of the player, forget about the ability for them to get tougher, but if we want them just playing longer and having more fun in that community, it's just like when you grew up in Minnesota. That's why Minnesota hockey is so successful, is because of the community involvement. So now you're even micro communitying it. You know, you have everyone plays hockey, but now you have every girl plays hockey, every boy plays hockey. And I think the more you can build those communities of people, like people around you, the longer you can keep people in the sport. And if that's our goal, is to play at the highest level, then you probably got to be in the sport past the age of 13 and not quit at 5 or 6 because there was some yucky boys you were playing against that just didn't know how to control their own emotions. It's just a different sport, I think. And I don't think there's anything wrong with girls playing with boys or boys playing with girls as far as like competitive nature and skills programs and practices. But there is a different community when it comes to, as the girls get older and the boys get older, that, you know, 14, 15, 16-year-old boys and girls are different. And I think, and then now you throw goaltending into it. I mean, one of the things I'm getting to is one of the aspects I think of goaltending, Laura, for you growing up right in high school, is like, as a goaltender, you're kind of hidden in the net. You have the mask on, you have the pads on. Like a lot of times, if you didn't know you were a girl, you wouldn't even know you were a girl. You're just making saves. So, you know, you're competing. So it is a little different in the net, right, than if you're a skater. Yeah,
it's definitely different in the net. What I saw as I got to higher levels is, you know, I did play a season over in Sweden, and I was on the women's team there, but sometimes I would practice with the men's team as well. But just the speed of their shot and the release of their shot was quicker. So then when I would go back into my women's team or my women's games over there, my timing was thrown off a little bit. And so that's one thing I see with, you know, youth goalies as well is, hey, we want to skate with bigger, faster, stronger kids all the time. And if they're trying to train with kids that are at a higher level than them, and then they go back to their teams, it does mess with the timing of their saves. So that's one thing I'm always a little bit wary about when people ask me who they should be training with.
So I want to dive into the goaltending thing, like Mike said. This is the last thing I'll say on this. And Laura, if you want any final thoughts, please feel free. Is that this is something I've learned, is that, you know, you have to take a look around your locker room and ask yourself, do most of the people in this room look like me? All right. And then come to the conclusion of, A, you will not understand what it's like to be somebody else in their shoes. And that's okay. right? Like, I think that you have to understand you're not going to understand, and that's okay, right? I will never understand what it is to be a woman or anybody other than me. That's okay, right? But then you have to ask yourself the questions of, is this person feeling welcome? Is this person understanding, right? So again, I don't want to make this into like a social episode. I'm just saying that we don't do that enough. Too many people assume, well, this is the way it is. It's fun. We should be with everybody else. And it's true, but you have to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes to the best of your ability and maybe ask questions. And that's what we're doing here. So, Laura, so anything else on that? I wanted to move on to the goaltending stuff because I got some good questions.
I do want to get onto the goaltending.
Yeah.
We've got a ton of questions for you. I guess my biggest question is just the psychological toughness that you need to be a goalie, and maybe some advice for parents. I had a dad come up to me. I was at a youth hockey tournament this weekend, and a dad came up. I don't know if he was looking for, sympathy or praise. He proudly announced, "My son just announced he wants to be a goalie." And I just looked at him, and he had terror in his eyes. I didn't quite know what to do at that point. Like, you poor guy, or yay.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to parents whose kids just suddenly announce, "I want to be a goalie"?
I mean, the position, like, you can be the hero, or you can have a rough game and feel like you let everyone down. And it's definitely a team sport, and that's one thing that everyone has to remember, from goalies, players to parents. It's a team sport, so a goalie doesn't lose a game. And if everyone at the mite level, like, I'm a big proponent of every kid trying to play, even if they don't want to play. They need to see what it feels like. They need to know what it feels like to make a save. They know what it feels like to let in a goal. So you have that empathy for the goalie in the net. I know, like, sometimes kids get on teams, and they have teammates that are great, but they also have teammates that sometimes say things to them if they give up a goal that teammate thought that maybe they should have had. And every goalie does it. I mean, I've let in terrible goals, and it feels terrible. But if you have teammates say something to you on top of that, it makes the position a lot harder. So I think every kid should be trying it, so they know how it feels.
Let's stay on the mites for a minute. We'll move our way up all the way to the pros and coaching. My son, I'm like not afraid to say this anymore. He's a goalie, right? I mean, he's fully dived in the position here over the last 2 months. Mike's signed for me over there. I've enjoyed it so far, Mike. Look, here's the progression real quick, Laura, for you. So he said he wanted to do it. I said, fine. He goes in the net, first game, gets a shutout. And I went, oh boy, this is not going to help his decision. So I told my wife, I said, look, at some point he's going to get pumped, and then we'll know. And it happened. He lost a game by a lot of goals. The team did, as you said. And he was fine. He was like, I want to get back in. I said, this kid really gets it, right? He's starting to get it. So my question for you are, what are the basic fundamentals, I'm not just talking mentally, that we should be working on with him right now as a new goaltender? I'm understanding this kid's not going to understand everything about every save, right? Where do you start with a kid who completely loves it? He's ready to do it. He wants to skate, right? Where do I start?
I always start with, basic goalie skating. Start from the stance, teach them. There's basically 3 goalie skating techniques, which is forward and backward C cuts, which pretty much every hockey player always, like, they have those ingrained pretty much. Shuffles, which are side to side movements. You keep your toes forward, scrape the ice a little bit, and then T pushes, which you turn your foot and kind of push and glide and then stop. So I go over those movements. They're the shuffles and the T pushes. They're kind of known, but not really known. They may have seen them, but they don't necessarily have a name to put with them. And then, from getting them comfortable moving around, throw in a butterfly and show them how to use their stick. I'm a huge proponent of stick work. Stick saves are the most predictable. You know where that puck's going to go if it hits your stick. So that's one of the first things I work on with goalies. either standing up or in their butterfly, working on the rotations with that, just so they can get some control. And then after that, I kind of move on into some other things.
Yeah.
You got
So
something
real
to say,
quick,
Mike?
yeah. So real quick on 10U goalies, I just wondering, like on that stick, right? Because that becomes a thing, like especially like in my world, we do a lot of quick change gear and goalies in, goalies out. We want everybody to try it, right? But we also, when you try it, and again, we don't want to discourage everyone from playing goalie. We need good goalies. I probably discourage people. I'm like, oh my God, like this, you're going, like, do you understand where you're going with this? Like, this is a big, it shouldn't be a big step, but it is a big step. But because of the way we're in a quick change world, right? And to your point, 8U and 10U, kids could play goalie at any time. Look at you. You didn't specialize until you were in high school, for God's sakes. I mean, and I think, but that's, I think that's where a lot of parents get a little caught up in 7, 8, 9-year-old specialization, which is one thing. But the stick, like, are you like, would you recommend, like, where is that size of the stick, like where you don't need a paddle that's a $300 stick, right? For a 10-year-old, you need would you say a properly sized stick and weight is much more important than like what it's made out of?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I still don't even play with the carbon fiber sticks. I prefer a foam core stick myself, but a properly sized stick, if the organization has two, say 21 or 22-inch sticks, that could be useful for pretty much all of the mites at that level.
So Laura, we just found that out. My son, when he first jumped in, obviously we were using the team's pads, and all they had was basically a cut down adult goalie stick. And it created a lot of problems because just the way he had to hold it, he was sitting almost back in the net because it was so tall. And as soon as we gave him a 21-inch paddle, it changed everything for me. It was way more comfortable in that. So where I want to kind of go with this, and this is what I think is important, Mike, really for this, is coaches, how many of you are aware of the things that Laura just spoke of? I wrote it down: shuffling, tee pushes, size of the goalie stick. Do you have adequate equipment for the kids to even try goaltending effectively? And if you're not aware, and some of you may be for sure, of shuffles and tee pushes, USA Hockey has some great resources on this that you can implement into your goaltending plan or to help your goaltenders at practice. And that's one of the reasons we're doing these episodes, is we don't think, and again, for all the coaches out there that are doing this, God bless you, but we just don't think there's a lot going into these practices of, I need to work with whoever is in net on some of these basic fundamentals. And I'm also going to use them as a chance to learn more about my own son and try to help him get better between the pipes, because I'm in a unique position to be interviewing professional goaltenders and professional people every month with this. So thank you for that. The next question I have, and we kind of just jumped into this, is what are the questions youth coaches should be asking that they're not currently asking, right? So I think every youth coach is capable of putting a good practice plan together for the skaters, right? Assuming they don't have a goaltending coach. What are those questions, or what are those thoughts they should be having when they're planning?
One thought that I just jumps out at me is, they have a goalie on their team, so they need to consider themselves to be a goalie coach. Because if you go to any training where it's a bunch of coaches, you ask, hey, how many people out here are goalie coach? You get a couple people maybe raise their hand, but if you're a coach and you have a goalie on your team, you are a goalie coach. And if you are afraid to talk to goalies, I know a lot of people say, like, I wasn't a goalie, I don't know what to say to them, I don't want to mess them up. There's a lot of resources out there. You can ask questions. I'm a goaltending development coordinator in Connecticut. We do try goalie for free days through USA Hockey. We can put on clinics that are goaltending based, bronze level, silver level clinics in the state. So last year I did one up in South Windsor, and this year I'm not sure if any communities are looking to put those together, but that's a great resource for coaches from a specific organization or all over to get together, learn the basics. They have a classroom portion, an on ice portion. So I think every coach should be taking those goalie specific development courses. I know USA Hockey is incorporating some goaltending stuff into their main like level 1, level 2 certs, but the goalie specific ones I think should be something that every coach takes as well.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you mentioned that, you know, if you're on the ice with a goalie, you are a goalie coach. I mean, the fact is you can't, unless you just have a shooter tutor in that. You say my whole practice is going to be based off of you know, some kind of blocking mechanism in the net, and there's going to be a goalie instructor working with my goalies off to the side. But I think in the reality of where we're at, we have to be able to manage those 15, 16 players and our goaltenders. So I guess, you know, staying in the youth world of goaltending, you know, where do you, and I know, you know, a lot of the training you do is in a smaller rink environment. You know, it's not a traditional sight lines and all that kind of stuff. So what advice can you give us as youth hockey coaches when we're working with the little kids and we're doing like the small area game areas, or we're doing cross ice hockey, or we're doing, you know, something that's not like in a traditional goaltender would look at sight lines and look at where they are in the net, right? But what can we do when we don't have those resources? When we know the net is in the corner, it's facing the glass, it's a battle drill one-on-one. What are like a couple of key things we can tell our goaltenders to be aware of when they're in those non-traditional like crease settings?
Yeah. One thing that I love is the easy crease marker, is drawing a crease every time you move the net, because if a goalie doesn't have a crease, it's really hard for them to know where they are, especially if you're moving the nets around to those non-traditional spots. And then making sure the goalie is starting from the goal line in the middle of the net. So no matter where the play is, start from the goal line, and then when the play starts coming, that's when you get out to toes top of the crease to get your initial angle. Especially when you're in those non-traditional spots, if you're just kind of out there following the play around, you have no clue where you're at, especially kids that aren't used to being in those spots. They don't have the sight lines. It's really hard to find your space, and once you get off your angle and you keep following the play, you just get a little more lost.
So it's definitely my fault, right? If I don't put a crease in there and I see a goalie and his butt is hanging outside the post, then that's my fault, right? I'm like, how are you not in the net? He goes, I don't even know the net is. Right. Like, you know, I'm just backing up and going forward. And if you think about it, and you're in a game situation or in a battle drill, and you're out and in and out and in, eventually you're going to be fading off. Like, so knowing that I can't look behind me all the time, I got to be able to look and say, okay, where am I real quick? Just those little, like, even if you don't have an easy crease marker, right? Just at least putting some kind of documentation of where even the posts are, even like, where are you in the net?
And then one thing that I always do is I do like a post check where I use my stick, I tap behind me, or I tap my gloves just so I can tell where I am, especially on those drills where I don't have any markings. But the key thing is starting from the goal line and then coming out, where most kids, they won't do that unless they're told to do that.
Laura, I'm trying to think of like metaphors in other sports here, and the only one that's kind of coming to my mind, like, because you're right, if you haven't played in the net, this is almost a foreign concept, right? I know the audience is understanding, but my best is kind of like if you were in the batter's box in baseball, and there was no batter's box, you know, think about how that would have changed your at bat, right? And think about how baseball players, when they step up to the plate every time, what do? Like you said, you might hit the posts, you kind of get your bearings. Well, you know, these guys tap the plate, they move around, they put their foot right where it's supposed to be, and then they're ready to bat. What if that wasn't there? It would start to throw you off a little bit. I'm going to take a guess that most people listening have had an at bat in their life. But if not, you know, Laura, great, jump in the crease for a minute, just see how it feels, right? And even if no one's shooting on you, go out and in, and you know, have this, am I still where I want to be, and turn around. But you're bringing up, this is why I love doing these episodes. You're bringing up a perspective of, you really need to be aware of where that net is, and you really can't look at it, like really almost ever until a play stoppage. That's a whole nother side to this position that I think that we need to be raising awareness of, especially what you said, draw a crease when you move the net. That's brilliant advice. That sounds obvious that I don't think a lot of people are doing. Right. So let's dive into that too. Look, like we said, you're goaltending quarter for an entire state. Tell us a little bit about your responsibilities with that, and maybe some of the conversations you're finding that you're having on a regular basis with the position, with coaches, with people in the area that we should all be aware of.
So my responsibilities with that are putting on, at least one training a year for coaches, the bronze level or silver level course. I do this in conjunction with my male counterpart, and we talk to organizations. He's been doing the coordinating a lot longer than I have. I'm new to the position. This is my second full year in it, but I honestly would love to have more conversations with organizations. I don't have too many people reaching out, even asking questions about goaltending, and I think it's an area that everyone could do better in, because you have many coaches who aren't trained in goaltending in any way, and just having a little bit of knowledge, a little more thought that goes into the practices, including goalies and what they're doing or how to make them better as well as the rest of the players would be huge. And it's definitely an area that we can all improve in.
Right, it definitely is. I've seen it over the years when my kids played. A lot of times the goalies were ignored, not really paid attention to. But I do appreciate the coaches who would bring in some goalie coaches for them, and who got it, and it would take them off to the side during the first half of the practice before all the kids got together to practice with the goalies, which I thought that kind of put a light bulb in their heads too. You could see the change in them when they got that specialized coaching. So would you encourage coaches who, don't really have the time, the resources, to go ahead and seek out somebody who can come in and help your goalie learn the tricks of the trade?
Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful, because it is such a technical position, and you do need someone that knows the techniques and little things on which leg is the most efficient to be getting up on. I don't expect any regular coach to know that, but the big thing for me is, do I have someone that's reinforcing what I'm going over in my practices? So if I'm harping on a goalie to start from the goal line and then come out to get their initial angle, and then their head coach just doesn't even pay attention, and the goalie's kind of all over the place, and then they're complaining about goals getting scored because the kid's off angle. It's like, well, are we reinforcing this in team practices? Maybe you are, maybe you're not, but that's something that I would suggest.
So here's where I want to go with this, and this is the analogy I use all the time with skaters, is that if I go to a professional power skating instructor for a week and I'm in a class, right? And he's great. There's so many great power skating instructors and proper skating instructors and dynamic skating instructors. And I go for a week. So I just spent $900 for my kid to be in a power skating class, and they leave at the end of the week. I'm like, oh my God, technically, look at their edges. Look how they're pivoting. Look how they're turning. Look at his stick is leading. Look at all the, their toes are facing the right way. And then some knucklehead like me takes the kid for the next 25 weeks and just skates him into the ground and doesn't teach skating and doesn't reinforce any of that. Aren't we just taking the $900 and burning it up? So like I have always like debated with parents that say, well, my kid's a goalie, he should play for free, or my kid's a goalie, they should get half price. I'm like, no, we're going to charge you full price, but we're also going to get you an instructor with us on the ice, so that what they're teaching and what I'm hearing, I can now work with you when that coach isn't there. Like, it's one thing to have a private coach outside, like, and Laura, we've talked about this a little bit, just because of the way you make your living, right? Is working with goaltenders on proper technique and proper mental preparation and proper positioning and all that kind of stuff. But if all it gets thrown out the window, wouldn't you agree that if every time they go back to their coach, it's either not reinforced or it's taught differently because they're not educated, then ultimately you're just taking money for nothing. Like there's no way you can evolve with the goalie unless you have a symbiotic relationship with the team that they're playing on. Now, goaltending might be a little less impactful because I think we'd all agree that coaches don't influence the goalie so much. There's like, okay, well, if you're a butterfly goalie, but if that's the way you're being taught, you just keep doing what you're doing, just stop the puck, right?
Yeah.
But for a forward, it's a little different. But I mean, how could you what are some of the key things you could tell your goalies, the ones you work with at the youth level? What can they do? What can a parent do to influence the head coach to have a conversation about, hey, I'm working with this person. I want to make sure I'm incorporated in here. How can we make sure we're communicating together so that I'm not just paying money and all this time and energy for something that keeps getting, taught out of me in practice?
Right. So I do have, goalies that I see privately who go to teams, and then they maybe have a different goalie coach on the ice with them during their team practices. They may have, no goalie coach on the ice with them during their team practices. And so there's kids that I do see consistently, and then there's some kids that, I see when, things they feel like they need a tune up. So one thing that I always take time to do after my lessons is, go over what we learned on the ice. Make the kids tell me like, hey, what are the two things that you should be focusing on? Reinforce that with the parents. Hey, if you see them doing this, that's our reminder of what we want to be looking for. And then if the head coach or the coach of the team, wants to get in touch with me based on what they're seeing, I'm always open for that. The more I can work with coaches and reinforce things, the better. If they're working with other goalie coaches, my main thing to the kids is, there's never one right way to do something. So, they may hear me say something, it's because I think it's going to help them. I'd like them to try it. If it works and they like it, great. If, it doesn't work for them and they hate it, that's totally fine too. But, especially at the young age, it can get confusing when they're hearing a lot of different voices and they're like, well, my goalie coach told me to do this. And, it's like, well, that's great, but is it working for you? And that's always my question. If someone, kind of gives me a little pushback on some suggestion that I made, it's like, well, is it working? Because we have to, teach goalies to actually like teach themselves a little bit too, because they're the ones out there. They know what they're seeing. They know how it feels, and what's going to work and what doesn't is always going to be different depending on the goalie.
So I guess we'll refer back to the communication piece.
Exactly.
with your paid coach, your volunteer mom or dad, and the parent, right, and the athlete, and knowing where you are in your age. But that's where I think even an 8-year-old can have a discussion about what they're doing in practice compared to games and how they're being taught at home or with a private instructor or their coach, right? Just what feels comfortable and what's the language you're using, so that we're like, you might, Laura, you might say T push, I might say T glide. And to an 8-year-old, that's a whole different, like those could be whole different things. Like they don't know, like, where are you going with this? It's like coaches that talked about, hey, you got to get that puck on the strong side. And I got players that go, well, I think the strong side is where the puck is. Well, I think the strong side's where the puck isn't. Okay, well, we have to have common, definitions, right? So I think that's one of the pieces we can do for our youth hockey goalies is to make sure we have common phrases and definitions of what we're talking about.
Mike, I think you brought this up earlier too he's laughing, Laura, because we talk about communication as a problem almost all the time, right? The lack of communication is always the problem. But Mike, you brought up the word symbiotic before, and I think that's a great kind of direction to go in here. Yeah, I think
that's
you
a big
said
word for me to bring up. But yeah, I might have brought it up.
You Connecticut people. No, I'm just kidding. I'm pretty sure you said that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way of looking at it, because look, if you can create an egoless, which is hard, environment with your on ice practices, right? And I know coaches, this can be tough when parents are pressuring, sometimes even players are pressuring, this is what you should do, this is what we should do. But when you look at it, and Lars bringing this point up too, it behooves you to know what your goaltenders are doing and vice versa. Because let's talk about just bottom lines here. You're probably going to put yourself in a better position to win if everybody's on the same page. I mean, I'm not probably, you will. The other thing too is they feed into each other. I remember coaching with a pro team, and we were very blessed to have by far the best goalie in the league. And we didn't rest on that. We used it as a tool of, if we have the best goalie in the league, that means our players are practicing against the best goalie. So we're going to structure our practices in a way that's going to challenge the goalie, but we're going to make our players better shooters and potentially better defenders by utilizing this person's skill set. And we communicated that to the goalie, because he would have been super pissed if we didn't, right? Just that it would have looked like we're just trying to screw him in net all the time, right? With hard drills. But the team got better, and we had one of the most spread out scoring teams in the league that year. Our players all got better, but that symbiotic relationship between the positions existed, and the rising tide lifted all ships in that scenario, right? So whether you have a great goaltender or not, the point is players can help goalies, goalies can help players, and it's on the coach to understand, as you both said earlier, you're the goaltending coach. If there's no goaltending coach there, either way, you can create environments where everyone's ability will get better, even if it's an environment, Laura, I'm just throwing it back to you, where you have a different kid in net every week at the younger levels, right? But I'm kind of throwing the question out there. There's no judgment here. It's just, how many of us are doing that? How many of us are approaching our practices with a complete awareness of there is someone in net, and there needs to be, Mike, to use your word, a symbiotic relationship between netminders and skaters. Laura, sorry, just throwing that back to you for your thoughts.
I think you nailed it. If you're only as good as your practices are preparing you to be. So, if you want to have a successful team that's, growing and developing, like you need to at least think about every position that's on the team, and everyone will get better because of it.
I think I remember when I was watching Laura coach, and especially at the pro level, that she was really conscious about me or anybody designing a drill that doesn't allow the goalie to finish being a goalie. And I think we do that all the time at the youth hockey level, where we expect our goalies to make saves and track pucks and stay with plays and battle. But then our practices, we don't allow them to track pucks or battle or make saves and track pucks, because it's too fast. Like, there's just another puck gets in there, and then there's another play. So Laura, maybe you could talk real quick about that, about, when you're designing those practices, we want them to look like the game, right? We can't expect our goalie to, make screenshot saves if we never have screenshot opportunities. We can't allow,
especially if they're not warmed up.
Yeah, well, Lord, don't even mention my pregame stuff, Laura. But if you got to take care of your goaltenders and listen to them, right? Make sure you hear what your goaltenders say. Like, this is what I need to get ready. I know you want to do this, but this is what I need. Okay, well, then let's work around what you need. And then I'm going to tell you what I need, and then we're going to work that out. But I think, Laura, just maybe talk to that a little bit about, how important it is to put goaltenders. They can't just take shots from the top of the circle, right? That they just, there's a time and a place for tracking in block drills, right? But then there's a time and a place where goalies have to actually learn to react and play and battle. But then we have to allow that battle to get all the way to the end where they make a save.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I see is the pace of the drills, and coaches don't want kids standing around in line, so then they just blow the whistle. But at the end of the day, you're not allowing the goalies to follow the play. Say the play starts with a pass, even having the goalie start from the post every time, coming out following it. The players, they need to be able to take a shot and then crash the net for the rebound. You don't have to play it all the way out if it's taking forever, but allow the little bit of time for a battle there, stopping in front of the net, creating those good habits. It's not only helping your goalie, it's helping your team, because
Right.
If you're doing drills where you're just ripping a puck and then peeling off to go back in line, like that's not training your players to have good habits either.
Yeah,
Right,
we
right.
talk
I
about
always
the
see that with
purpose
coaches all the
behind a
time.
drill.
Like I can't believe I can't get my girls or I can't get my players to drive to the net. Well, every drill you have is they shoot and they go to a line. So but if you do that and
Right.
you're doing that for 40 weeks. So I think you're absolutely right. Like if you want your goaltenders to be better and your forwards to get better, you can do both by maybe slowing your practices down a little bit, slowing the drill down a little bit. It could be just as intense, right? But just making it look more like the game.
Well, we talk about this too, Mike, about the purpose of a drill versus just doing the drill. And we raised this question on the show before. Would you rather do 8 drills okay or 5 drills well? Right, where there's an understanding of why you're doing the drill, and it's not just shooting and going to the corner to get in line again. And again, different age groups, this is tough. When you're 8, you're thinking about Fortnite more than you're thinking about what you're trying to do there. So like, I'm understanding of that to a point, but the real meaning behind a drill, the understanding of a goaltender's positioning and what they need to do to and I've seen this before, Laura, goalies like to have a second to kind of collect their thoughts on what just happened sometimes, especially if the puck goes in the net. And I'm not saying it's every time. They don't need 10 minutes, but give them a second. Give them a second to get their bearings, understand, okay, because I have to work on moving my positioning different for the next time that happens. That extra second or two can be very valuable, I'm assuming, for a goaltender, right? Instead of, hey, the next shot's coming, get up.
Yeah, you'll see that too. A goalie will get scored on, and then the next couple of shots are goals too, if they don't have that time to reset. Even if it's just like, let them take a deep breath, let it out. Okay, let's do the next rep, because that is a mental reset that goalies need, and it's
Right.
a huge skill. You see NHL goalies, they get scored on, they go for a skate, they spray their water bottle,
Right.
and you can't do that for every goal you give up in practice. But especially if you see like a few going in a row, like take a pause, let the goalie have that mental reset, and then they'll be better because of it.
I mean, that's such a great point, right? If I'm a defenseman and I get just toasted, I get to go to the corner and stew on it until the other 8 defensemen go. Right? I get plenty of time to reset. Like I got to go, okay, well, I actually just forgot about that already. It didn't bother me. But if you're a goalie, you don't get to forget about it, because the other one just went right past your shoulder, and then another one went off the back of your head. Then the other one another kid shot a puck out of the corner and hit you in the back. So I think it's just like, it's one of those things where, if you're a coach, be aware of where your goaltender is and say, okay, let's stop the drill, get a drink of water, or maybe you could even fake it, right? By saying, hey, we want to work on this certain technique. Let your goalie have that breath. Let them go. And then, but we have to teach them to, hey, when I bring the guys in, or I bring the team in, you need to now go and reset. Like that's your cue. Like you need to initiate that. And then,
Mike, not just coaches,
learn how to do it.
I mean, this is a player responsibility too. Like I am and was a center. I will not, unless the ref is really rushing me, I will not come to the dot until I know my goaltender is ready. Especially after a goal. And I see this all the time. A goal is scored, you're amped up, you want to go because you don't want to be sitting in the misery for too long. And I see centers rush to the dot, and the goalie is not ready. Right now, the referee is obviously supposed to be on that too. But coaches, you can tell your centers, don't go to that dot until you know your goaltender is ready, no matter where the face-off is. And I always try, even in the defensive zone, especially in the defensive zone, but even in the offensive zone, I'll always kind of just peek back and make sure they're set. Because I'd get mad if my teammates were just rushing face-offs and I needed a second. And lastly, I'll say this. Most refs, officials, if you say my goalie needs a second, they're going to take the second. I don't think I've ever had a ref rush me when I said my goaltender's not ready. Right. But it's on players and coaches. Mike, so I wasn't trying to cut you off. I'm just saying that this is a responsibility of the whole team to make sure that the goal, and I'm assuming the goalie would appreciate that the teammates are also, aware that I'm not ready yet.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone likes to feel some goalie love.
Right.
Yeah, that's great, and that's a great point. That's a great point though. Just be aware, hey, listen,
Yeah.
especially in a game, right? The goal got scored. You can't take a timeout every time a goal scored. You only get one. So manufacture that time. Just get your players to understand that, teach your goalie how to unbuckle a strap every now and then, or just get
You heard it here, folks. Mike Finelli's that guy. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, the problem is it's hard to do it anymore with these new pads, right? Because everything's
Right.
Velcro. So it's like, hey, what happened to that Velcro can't just come off on its own. Oh, I got to fix the strap. But I think it's just, but that's a mental reset. That's a really great opportunity. But Laura, would you agree that players don't know, unless you teach them that, most don't know it. Like a 10-year-old kid's not going to know to even do that. So, but if you teach them those, that strategy and say, do you know that in 8 seconds you can reset your whole mental,
Right.
Outlook of the game? Well, how do I do that? Okay, well, let's work on that, and then we can evolve that as a player gets older.
I definitely agree. It's just, talking to kids about being good teammates, especially checking in on your goalie, whether it's, a stick tap to the pads, a pat on the back, something that, lets you know that you're supported. That goes a long way.
Yeah, look, I would say too, as a skater, if you're on the ice for a goal against, think about how you feel. Almost every skater will blame themselves if they're accountable, or just feel bad that the goal went. How do you think the goalie feels? I mean, and Mike, you said it. Most of the time you're coming off the ice, you're going to sit there for a few minutes and get a chance to reset. Tenders have no chance. It's you got to get out, you got to go. So Laura, I want to.
Or it could be like Zach Wilson of the Jets and just say, I don't know, I did my part. It was the defense. I'm not accountable. Like, I'm not accountable for this goaltender being bad. That's his problem.
No I in team. Ain't no we either.
Right. And Laura, I have a question for you about after a game, advice for parents. If your kid comes off the ice, the goalie, they feel it was their fault they lost the game. They're going to feel that way. They just do. That's what they do. They put the weight of the game on their shoulders all the time. I see it. What is it that you should not say as a parent if your kid feels just awful after the game, or maybe they even got pulled?
You're right, son. That was your fault.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
I know, but I hear them. Oh, please.
Don't nickname him Civ.
One of my goalie partners in college, her father used to say he should have put a lawn chair in the net because it would make more saves than her.
Brutal.
And it was a funny thing, when we were in college, that we would joke about. But the main thing is take the goalie's lead. You get in the car. Sometimes you just dread getting in the car with your parents because you don't want them to say anything about the game. Like, especially if it's a game where you felt like you did not play your best. The goalies need to know that they're loved no matter what. It doesn't matter the outcome of the game. You're playing for the passion, the love of the game. Sometimes, you have a great game, sometimes you don't, but at the end of the day, you need to know that your parents are still supporting you no matter what. And if the goalie wants to talk about it, great. But if they don't want to talk about it, that's okay too. And they may bring it up eventually, but those moments right after the game, they're so raw and they can be so painful that, sometimes they just need space to process.
Yeah, we did a great episode called "The Car Ride is Not for Coaching" that I always encourage parents to listen to. And we talked about that is that, one of the things that I tell my kids before they play is I don't care what happens out there today. I'm going to love you no matter what after the game, no matter what happens. I want them to feel safe in that space. I don't want them to have any fear of disappointing me in that way. Right. And I think you're right about taking the lead. We've said this in Might. As soon as the kid's off the ice, he is not thinking about hockey. And I think one of the biggest failures I make, and I'll be vulnerable with this, is like I'm a coach. I want to discuss the game, and I have to really shut myself up of do not talk about, even if you had a good game, do not talk about it. It's about having fun at his age. And as you said, as you get older, you got to take the lead from the player. They're already beating themselves up. or
they know they know
if
if they played great or they didn't play, if they didn't play well. But I want to get this in, Laura, because I think I try to ask this to any professional goalie coach that we get a chance to talk with. But when is it, or is it the opportunity when you have two goalies? Now we're talking like 12U, 14U, 16U, and I hear all the parents and they're shopping around for teams, and all these parents want their kids to play on a team that's only them. Like I want my kid to be the goalie. Like, oh, we have another goalie, or he has to compete with somebody, or, well, is he going to get more of the playing time than less of the playing time? What are some of the things you could, like, what are some strategies or advice you would give? I know what my feeling is on this, but just, when you go to a team and you talk about, supporting, I mean, one of the biggest support structures is your teammate, and the best teammate that can support you is the one that understands maybe you the most is another goaltender. So what are some of the things that you've seen in the pros and cons of having like a single goalie system, a two goalie system where they're competing against each other, or like a hierarchy of, okay, here's my starting goalie, and here's the kid that's paying the rest of the bill?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference when you're looking at, youth level versus high school and things like that. My biggest advice to parents is, where are they going to get the most growth and development? Because if they're the only goalie on a team, but that team doesn't pay any attention to them, they're not getting any extra goalie support. Maybe the team's great and the goalie's not facing any shots. Maybe the team's terrible and they're just getting shelled. That's one thing that I would look at, is what are they doing for the goalie and their development. I'm a huge fan of a two goalie system, just because you have that person that understands what you're going through. You have that competition factor, whether it is for playing time or it's just pushing each other to be better. I feel that goalies who are by themselves, there's no one there really holding them accountable. So, they could be lazy, they could do whatever they want, and they're still going to play all the time, every single game. But it's also a lot of pressure too, because, they're having to play through sickness, they're playing through injuries. In practice, they're practicing reps when they're tired, and then their form gets sloppy. So I'm never an advocate for a single goalie on a team, to be honest.
And I'm always fighting with parents, like, they're, oh, I can get on this team and he'll be the starter. I'm like, yeah, but like reality is going to strike in. Like, when I love watching like the end of college hockey games and pro games, when the first person off the bench after a great game is the other goalie. Like, the first person coming there and hugging that goalie, or giving the high five, or showing this great emotion, is the competition, or or whoever that might be. And I think that's, to me, that's like the healthiest part of having great teammates like that, is that you can compete and fight. Like, I'm sure, Laura, right, when you played at the college and pro level, if you had somebody in a small area game competing against you, that elevated your game. That's like, I'm not letting a goal in. You can let a goal in, but I'm not letting a goal in. And that now becomes a really big fight, as opposed to, well, it doesn't really matter if I let a goal in because I'm playing anyway. This other kid's not good. And I think that and I think, and that really, I think, affects the players as well, in the way they play in front of certain people, and how they react to when a certain goalie's in the net. Like, when they think one goalie is more competitive than the other, or one goalie is not as, is not going to hurt them as much as the other, you just play differently. So I think it's just, so I think I love that. I mean, I'm a two goalie person, but I just think that competition piece is really important. So I think it's probably,
Mike,
just advice for parents not to go look for the place where you're going to play 80 games and practice every day by yourself, because some coach told you, oh, no, you're my guy, and you're going to be the only goalie we have.
I think about the broad advice we've been given in the past, and a lot of people we've interviewed and ourselves have always said, well, you have to go where it's right for you right now in a development sense. And I think it's true for the goaltending position too. Like, sometimes you might need a confidence year. Sometimes you might need a year where you're overly challenged and maybe the team's not so good, but you got to find what's right for your development. And like most things, things in moderation are good. You're probably not going to be the starting number one best goaltender in the league for 16 years in a row. And parents, while you might want that, it's not a reality, right? So I would look at it, and Laura, you tell us if you agree. Again, we approach the skater with this mentality of you have to find the right development level for that player at that time, meet them where they're at. I'm assuming that's true for goaltending as well, correct?
Yes, it's definitely true. And one thing I do want to mention is the prevalence of injuries in goalies.
Mm.
You know, you see hip problems, knee problems. So if you're constantly, you know, the only goalie on a team facing every single shot in practice, every single
Right.
shot in games, you know, it's fine when, you know, for when you're young, but the more wear and tear you have on your hips and your knees and joints, your longevity isn't going to be as long. And so that's one thing that I try to be mindful of, even in my private lessons, is not always making the goalies drop down in, you know, their butterfly or a seal on the post, just because I'm thinking about their hip health as well.
That's a great point that I don't think we take into account enough. And look, even at the professional level, very few goaltenders have played most of the season, right? And when I say most, I mean 78, 79 games. It has happened, but they also have the greatest medical people on the planet typically with them, and it's a little bit of a different situation. You got to think about the health. Speaking of health, Laura, this is gonna be my last question. I'm a big proponent of mental health, mental fitness. And I think that no position on the ice has to champion that more than the goaltender. So could you just tell us a little bit maybe about, from your own experience, what you do to practice your own mental fitness, or how you get yourself mentally reset when you have to, and how important that is to the position?
It is one of the biggest parts of the position. You'll see great goalies who mentally, once they get scored on, you know, it becomes floodgates sometimes if they're not able to reset. So me personally, I've always been like huge on the mental side of the game. Just focusing on different activities where I'm focused on being present in the moment. So for me, yoga was huge. I didn't start doing it until I was out of college, but if I had found that earlier, I think it definitely would have benefited me in my career. I'm currently also going to school for sports psychology because it is a passion of mine. So I'm working on my master's right now. But just implementing that into, you know, your team culture, even when kids are young, they can understand, you know, some sort of mindfulness. And even if it's for a goalie, what I call an anchor, you know, after you get scored on, developing a routine to reset, and it's time to let that goal go and refocus on what's coming next. You know, I always tap both posts, hit my gloves together, and then kind of hunch over with my elbows on my knees. And then once that puck drops, you know, it's a new game. But there's every goalie can develop their own little anchor that helps them reset, and I think that's huge.
That's a fantastic answer, and I couldn't agree with you more, especially the part about how younger athletes can learn mindfulness really from the start. It's not something you have to be older to understand. And while younger players have a much harder time staying present, it's a completely normal thing. You can start to introduce them to very base meditation, yoga, and things like that from the start. And I think it helps everybody. You know, I use goaltenders as a source of inspiration for myself. You know, if a puck goes in the net, I'm like, well, you know what? He or she's got to get back up. I got to get back up too. Like, that's my anchor, right? Is using that. But Laura, this has been really informative. I was gonna say, Christy, Mike, do you have anything else before we close this one out?
It's fantastic. I love the resetting tips. You know,
Yeah.
I've seen our goalie. Now I know what that was. She hits the post, and then she hits the post, and then she hunkers down. So that's a resetting trick, right?
Yeah.
Now I know.
And
I didn't even know that.
A lot of goalies do that.
Keep hitting the post.
They spray their water up and they watch the droplets go down. You'll see that commonly, but that's just, you know, focusing and like even vision tracking on that. So
And I'm going to pay a little closer attention to those resetting techniques.
yeah,
so.
they're not just being
that
weird.
was.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I love
I was
that.
just gonna say, all those crazy things we think they're doing, they're not. They're just getting set
It's
again.
like
Yeah.
it makes sense. And the yoga, thank you for bringing that up. Our girls' high school hockey team incorporated that during their off-ice training, and what a world of difference that made. So I highly encourage that. Yeah, fantastic advice.
Yeah,
Thank you.
my son's phys ed teacher during the pandemic, it had the kids doing yoga. It was like a Star Wars yoga or something like that. You know, these are 8-year-olds, but it could be fun, right? It doesn't have to be like,
Yeah.
you think about yoga, like, oh my God, you got to get yoga mat, you got to get yoga pants, and you got to do the whole thing. So I said, just like, I think it a matter of, just learning how to do these little pieces of mindfulness and just kind of meditation. Doesn't have to be like a formal thing. It could be just something you build into habits of the kids. And I think that's a great way to introduce it is through fun. But also then you start expanding it, right? As you get older, you find ways that it's helping you, and then you actually see the results, right? And then, like, to Laura, your point, like if you would have been introduced to that earlier, those results that you're seeing now and in your pro career, you said, oh wow, if I would have been doing that, preparing for this and that and this, who knows where it would have helped me day to day.
Right.
But I think we should mention too that these techniques we're talking about are not limited to just children, Mike. As you said, you're never too young or too old to learn present moment awareness and have it impact your life in a positive way.
Is that are you referencing me?
I'm talking to everyone, Mike. I'm talking to this show is your present moment awareness.
I do a lot of mindfulness. Trust me. I'd be
know
a
you
lot
do.
more bitter right now if I didn't do that.
Hey, listen, I didn't discover this until my 30s, and I'm thankful for it every single day. So my point is, as Laura said, it's never too late to find this stuff. It'll help you in everything you're doing, parenting, coaching, work. I think present moment awareness is a gift. If you can even discover it and understand, be aware of it, that is a huge step forward in anyone's life. And to kind of round this out, Laura, goaltenders have to have that from the start or some form of that. And that is what makes goaltenders so great. Laura, you've been a fantastic guest. We can't thank you enough for being here today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for being here. And again, we're doing these episodes, Our Kids Play Goalie, monthly here. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want to ask one of our guests like Laura a question, email us at team@ourkidsplayhockey.com. Laura, forgive me for this. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you or follow you as well, just in case they want to follow you directly.
I have a website. It's thegoaliepad.net, and you can reach out to me there. Click on contact, and that's the best way to reach me.
I also want to note that .net is usually frowned upon, but this may be the greatest application of .net in the history of the web. So congratulations.
That is why I chose it. So
brilliant.
It made sense.
That's brilliant. It usually gets a groan or an eye roll, but that one makes a lot of sense. So it was thegoaliepad.net, right? Laura Brennan with us today. Again, email us team@ourkidsplayhockey.com. You can visit us at ourkidsplayhockey.com for every single episode we've ever done, including the Our Kids Play Goalie episodes. But above all, audience, want to thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. We know many of you have skaters and not goaltenders, but we get better when we do this together. So for Christy Casciano Burns and Mike Benelli and Laura Brennan, I'm Lee Elias. We'll see you on the next episode of Our Kids Play Goalie. Take care, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.